You almost didn't click on this. Something made you stop. Not curiosity exactly. Not hope exactly. Something quieter than both of those, something that recognized this before your mind had time to decide. That recognition is real. It knows things about where you are right now that you have not yet said out loud to anyone. And it brought you here. So before anything else, I want you to know that I see you. Not the version of you that shows up on time and answers messages and keeps it together in public. Not the version that says, "I'm fine," and means it about 40% of the time. I mean the version of you that is watching this alone, probably at night, in a room where no one else can see your face. That version. The one who has been carrying something heavy for longer than feels fair. You have been waiting for something to shift. Not dramatically. You stopped expecting dramatic a while ago. You have just been waiting for the feeling of forward movement. The feeling that what you went through, what you lost, what was done to you, what you let go of, was not the end of your story. You are waiting to feel like it was the beginning of something, and here is what I want to say to you before we go any further. There is a pattern that has been running quietly in your life. You may not have named it, but you have felt it. It is the pattern of shrinking yourself in rooms where you once stood fully. Of dimming something bright in you so that others would feel comfortable. Of giving second chances past the point where second chances were wise, not because you were naive, but because you believed in people more than they deserved. And you are still not sure whether that was your greatest strength or your most costly mistake. You have also carried this, the habit of returning to old pain to see if it still hurts, as if you owe it regular visits. The habit of measuring your progress by someone else's reaction to it. The habit of apologizing for taking up space that was always rightfully yours. The habit of waiting until you feel ready, not realizing that readiness was never coming, because readiness is not a feeling. It is a decision. And the fifth thing, the one that lives deepest, is this. You have been trying to become unrecognizable to others, when the real transformation has always been about becoming unrecognizable to the old version of yourself. I am not here to tell you everything will completely transform overnight. I am not going to promise you a miracle. But I will tell you this, the person who watches this video fully and carries even one of these truths into tomorrow will not have a single regret about the time they spent here tonight. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are not too late. You are simply at the door you have been walking toward. And I am glad you stepped through it. Welcome. You are exactly where you need to be. This is Healing Love Space, and this conversation was always going to happen. Now, before we go further, I need to leave something unfinished for a moment. There is a reason that the people who hurt you are still living rent-free in your mind even though you have already decided to move on. There is a reason the decision to change has not yet produced the feeling of change. We will get to both of those. But not yet. And there is something else, something that will sound almost impossible when I say it plainly. The moment you stopped trying to win them back, that was the moment you started winning. You just did not know what you were winning yet. Before this video ends, you will understand exactly what becoming unrecognizable actually requires. Not the performance of it, not the aesthetic of it, but the internal law that makes it irreversible. Let me tell you what it actually feels like to be where you are right now. It feels like a specific kind of exhaustion. Not the tiredness that sleep fixes. The kind that comes from holding yourself together for an audience that stopped watching. The kind that lives behind the eyes. The kind that makes ordinary Tuesday afternoons feel heavier than they have any right to be. You have sat in rooms full of people and felt completely alone in a way you could not explain without sounding ungrateful. You have scrolled past their lives on a screen and felt something that was not quite jealousy and not quite grief, but lived in the exact space between them. You have replayed conversations not because you are weak but because your mind is still trying to make sense of something that was never going to make sense on its terms. You have hoped quietly. Privately. In the way that people hope when they are afraid to hope loudly, because loud hope has let you down before, and the disappointment of public hope is a specific kind of shame you have decided you can no longer afford. And there is this: some mornings you wake up and you feel it, a lightness, a readiness, a sense that today could be different. And then something small happens. A memory. A name. A song. And the morning closes back up again. That is not weakness. That is not failure. That is the evidence of how deeply you have felt. And the same depth that makes the pain this acute, that same depth is what will make your becoming this complete. You are not someone who does things halfway. That is why this has taken so long. Because halfway was never going to be enough for you. What is coming is full. What is coming is permanent. What is coming will make everything that came before it look exactly like what it was. Preparation. The pain is not proof you are failing. It is proof you are close. I have seen this before. I have lived through a version of it. And what comes after this specific kind of darkness is not just light, it is clarity. It is the kind of clarity that makes you quietly terrifying to the people who thought they had finished you. There is a name for what has been holding you back. I want to give it to you because named things lose their power over unnamed people. I call it borrowed smallness. Borrowed smallness is what happens when you internalize someone else's limited version of who you are, and then live inside that version as if it were your own. It is not something they forced on you. It is something you accepted, slowly, in small moments, a word here, a dismissal there, a silence that lasted too long. And over time, that borrowed version of yourself became the instruction set running quietly beneath every decision. Borrowed smallness sounds like, maybe they are right. It sounds like, I should not want too much. It sounds like, if I stay smaller, I will be safer. It sounds like, my becoming will make others uncomfortable, so perhaps I should wait. It formed the way most protective patterns form, as a gift. At some point in your life, making yourself smaller kept something safe. Maybe it kept peace. Maybe it kept a relationship. Maybe it kept you from a particular kind of pain. The subconscious is extraordinarily loyal. It kept following the instruction long after the instruction stopped serving you, because that is what the subconscious does. It holds old commands as law until something new and true replaces them, and this is what Florence Scovel Shinn knew, that the subconscious does not distinguish between a lie it has believed for 20 years and a truth it has just received. It only knows what you give it with feeling and repetition. Which means borrowed smallness is not permanent. It is a program. And programs can be rewritten. I am no longer who they left behind, I am who they cannot reach. Say that once. Just once. Feel what it does in your chest. Now let me show you how change actually happens, not theoretically, not motivationally, but mechanically. At the level of law, the first principle is what Shinn called the law of preparation. She taught that whatever you prepare for in the inner world, you authorize in the outer world. Not attract, authorize. There is a difference. Attraction is passive. Authorization is active. When you begin preparing your inner life for the version of yourself that is becoming unrecognizable, when you begin treating that version as already true, you are not wishing. You are legislating. You are writing a law in the language the subconscious reads. A woman in her 50s had lost her marriage, her business, and, she said, her face. By which she meant the face she had when she still believed in herself. She did not start with action. She started with preparation. She began arranging her home as if she were already the woman she was becoming. She began speaking as if the shift had already occurred. 3 months later, she did not look like someone who was healing. She looked like someone who had already healed. The outer world had simply caught up to the inner authorization. The second principle is the law of non-resistance. This is perhaps Shinn's most important teaching and the one most people get wrong. Non-resistance does not mean passivity. It does not mean tolerating what harms you. It means releasing the grip of the old story with such completeness that it no longer has the power to define the new one. The person you are becoming cannot fully arrive while you are still holding the door open for the person you are leaving. A man who had spent 4 years building a case, in his mind, in conversations with friends, in the quiet courtroom of his own thoughts, for why what happened to him was wrong and who was responsible and what they owed him, that man was not healing. He was practicing pain. The moment he released the case, not forgave, not forgot, just released, something in his body changed. He said it felt like setting down something he had not realized he had been carrying with both hands. Within 6 months, his life was unrecognizable. Not because circumstances changed. Because he stopped feeding the old story the energy it needed to stay alive. The third principle is what I call the law of the declared self. Shin understood that the spoken word carries a creative charge that the inner word does not. When you speak a thing, out loud, with intention, in the present tense, you are doing something the subconscious cannot ignore. You are making a declaration in a frequency it is compelled to align with. This is not metaphor. This is the mechanism. The declared self is not who you are trying to become. It is who you are already choosing to be, spoken into the room, into the air, into the part of you that has been waiting for permission. Say it slowly now. Let it move through you. Say it again. I am no longer who they left behind, I am who they cannot reach. If this feels true in you tonight, write this in the comments and let your own words witness you. I am no longer who they left behind, I am who they cannot reach. Let your own declaration be the beginning of the testimony that someone else needs to find. Now I want to give you something to carry into sleep tonight. Not a list of things to do. A practice, simple, lived, quiet, the kind that roots in the body and carries itself into the subconscious where real change is seated. Tonight, when the room goes quiet and the day is finished with you, lie still and breathe into the space just below your collarbone. That space holds more than you know. It is where borrowed smallness has been living. And tonight you are going to give it new instructions. In that stillness, I want you to see, not imagine, see, the version of yourself that is unrecognizable. Not perfect. Not invulnerable. Just whole. Standing somewhere, a room, a doorway, an open space, with the particular quiet confidence of someone who no longer needs to prove anything to anyone. Someone who is not healed from what happened. Someone who is so far beyond it that it has become simply a story they lived through on the way to this. Look at that version of you. Notice what they are wearing. Notice how they hold their shoulders. Notice the expression on their face, not triumph, not relief, just settled. Just arrived. Now say it, out loud or in a whisper, but with your actual voice. Say it to that version of yourself. What you declare at the edge of sleep, you authorize in the hours when the conscious mind steps aside and the deeper law takes over. This is not magic. This is the mechanism. You are not hoping. You are legislating. You are preparing the inner world for what you have already authorized. Sleep will carry it. Let it. Am no longer who they left behind, I am who they cannot reach. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that the last thought before sleep is the most powerful instruction you can give the subconscious, because sleep is the passage through which the inner world receives what the outer world cannot yet hold. What you declare at the edge of sleep, you authorize in the hours when the conscious mind steps aside and the deeper law takes over. This is not magic. This is the mechanism. You are not hoping. You are legislating. You are preparing the inner world for what you have already authorized. Sleep will carry it. Let it. If something in the last few minutes just settled in you, like a quiet recognition rather than a new idea, tap like. I want to tell you about someone. She was not remarkable in the way people use that word. She had not built an empire or overcome a catastrophe so dramatic that it would make a clean story. She had simply, quietly, slowly, over the course of about 4 years, disappeared. Not physically. She was present at every dinner table, every work meeting, every weekend obligation. She showed up. She was reliable. She smiled at the right moments. But the woman who had once had opinions, she spoke loudly, dreams she did not qualify, a laugh that started in her whole body, that woman had retreated somewhere so far inside that most days she could not find her. She had gotten very skilled at being the version of herself that other people needed. A particular Tuesday in November, she would later say it was a Tuesday, she remembered because she had an unremarkable lunch meeting and came home to an empty apartment and sat down on the floor. Not dramatically. Just sat down. And noticed she had no idea what she wanted. Not for dinner. Not for her life. Not for the next 5 minutes. She had spent so long arranging herself around other people's needs that her own interior had gone quiet. The silence was not peaceful. It was the silence of a room where something that used to live had moved out. She did not make a dramatic decision that night. She did not write a manifesto or make a phone call or book a flight. She said one sentence. Out loud. In an empty room where no one could hear it. She said, "I am not done." That was it. 3 words. Not a prayer exactly. Not an affirmation exactly. A declaration. A refusal. A small and stubborn act of spiritual authorship in a room where the only witness was the law itself, which, as Shin understood, is the only witness that counts. She began, slowly, to prepare. She began telling the inner world a different story than the one the outer world had confirmed. She stopped revisiting the evidence for her smallness. Not because it was not there, it was there, she knew every piece of it, but because reviewing evidence for a verdict you are no longer accepting is not honesty. It is loyalty to a story that stopped serving you. She did not become unrecognizable in a month. It was more like a season. And then another. And then one morning she looked in the mirror not to assess whether she was enough but simply to see herself, and the woman looking back was not the woman who had sat on the floor that Tuesday in November. The woman looking back had her shoulders in a different position. Had a particular quality of settled attention in her eyes. Had the look of someone who had traveled somewhere interior and difficult and come back with something that could not be taken. The people in her life noticed before she did. Not all at once. In small moments, a response she gave that surprised them, a decision she made without consultation, a silence she held that she would once have rushed to fill. They noticed that something had changed. Some of them were delighted by it. Some of them were unsettled. A few quietly withdrew. She told me later that the withdrawals had hurt at first. And then they had clarified. Because the people who could not stay for the version of her that was whole, those were exactly the people she had been shrinking for. And their leaving was not loss. Their leaving was the outer world catching up to the decision she had already made on the floor of her apartment on a Tuesday in November. The best revenge, she said to me one afternoon, is not making them regret leaving. That is still about them. The best revenge is becoming so unrecognizable to the version of yourself they knew, so completely and permanently transformed, that their memory of you becomes a story about someone who no longer exists. I am no longer who they left behind, I am who they cannot reach. Now I want to give you a specific practice to carry forward from tonight. Not forever. Just for the next 21 days. Because 21 days is long enough for a new instruction to begin settling into the subconscious as default, and short enough to feel like something you can actually commit to right now. For 21 days, 3 times each day, upon waking before you look at your phone, at midday before you eat, and at the edge of sleep before you close your eyes, you will speak this declaration out loud. Not in your head. With your actual voice. Even if it is barely a whisper, I am no longer who they left behind, I am who they cannot reach. You do not need to believe it completely at first. That is not how the mechanism works. You simply need to give the inner world a consistent instruction in the language it reads, spoken word, present tense, emotional specificity. Shin was clear, you are not wishing for a future. You are declaring a law. And the law does not require your complete belief. It requires your consistent declaration. This is not homework. This is a quiet contract you are choosing with yourself, in this room, right now, as the only witness that actually counts. Here is what I want to say to you before we close. This moment is not small. This specific moment, this room you are in, this breath you are taking right now, this is the moment after which things are different. Not because of what I have said. Because of what you have stayed for. The person who closes this video right now is not the same person who pressed play. Something has moved. Something that was slightly more closed is slightly less closed. And that slight opening, that is enough. That is more than enough. That is where everything that comes next gets in. You did not come here by accident. You came here because a part of you, the part that has never stopped fighting for you, even when you stopped, that part knew this was the next step. And you took it. The waiting is over. Not because everything is solved. Because you have decided. And the moment of true decision, the moment you choose the version of yourself that is unrecognizable over the version of yourself that was borrowed, that moment is irreversible. The law does not undo what has been authorized. You are no longer who they left behind. Speak it now. One more time. Slowly. With full weight. I am no longer who they left behind, I am who they cannot reach. That is not an affirmation. That is a completed decision. And it was always yours to make. If this felt like it was written for you, because in a deeper way, it was, welcome home to Healing Love Space.